concerned about how the market is reacting to the
No, the market's doing great. Our country's doing great. Everybody was telling me yesterday, people are trying to copy the formula. We cut taxes way down. We got rid of regulations, large numbers, more than any president's ever gotten rid of. And we're doing very well. Our country's doing fantastically well. I mean, you people want a recession because you think, maybe that's the way to get Trump out. Maybe that's the way we get him out. But I don't even think that would work because, look, if there's anything, it's, we've got to go into trade negotiations to get it right. But ultimately, it'll be many times what it was before. Our country is doing really well. We have horrible trade deals, and I'm straightening them out. The biggest one by far is China.
I just want to say I congratulate the President on everything that the American economy is achieving. It's fantastic to see that, but just to register a faint sheep-like note of our view on the trade war. We're in favour of trade peace on the whole.
Sure.
In favour of trade peace with China?
Well, we think that on the whole, the UK has profited massively in the last 200 years from free trade. And that's what we want. So we're keen to see that. Prime Minister, if you don't like tariffs on that.
This is the UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who, it should be noted, has been likened to a British version of Trump. He's a far-right, gaffe-prone, controversial figure who's offered his full-throated support for Brexit. And yet, despite all of that, he still managed to interrupt Trump's self-congratulatory diatribe about the US economy to interject his dissatisfaction with the trade war with China, rightly saying that countries benefit from free trade and that tariffs on the whole are generally counterproductive. For Boris Johnson to be the adult in the room says a lot. This is a guy who most recently brought a smoked kipper, a type of fish, on stage as a prop to complain about EU regulations while advocating for Brexit.
This kipper. This kipper, which has been presented to me just now by the editor of a national newspaper, who received it from a kipper smoker in the Isle of Man, who is utterly furious because after decades of sending kippers like this through the post, he has had his costs massively increased by Brussels bureaucrats who have insisted that each kipper must be accompanied by a plastic ice pillow. Pointless, expensive, environmentally damaging elfin safety, ladies and gentlemen. And when we come out, therefore, we will not only be able to take back control of our regulatory framework and end this damaging regulatory overkill, but we'll also be able to do things to boost Britain's economy, which leads the world in so many sectors.
Only there was a minor flaw in his rationale.
The problem is that the legislation he is referring to, the regulation he's referring to, that requires kippers to have what he describes as ice pillows in the packet when they're sent from wherever it might be to somewhere else in the UK, is British legislation. It's not EU legislation, and that much was made clear by the Commission spokesperson for food safety. Clearly they weren't best pleased at what, incidentally, the Commissioner for Food Safety called fake news in a tweet yesterday.
And so for this guy, the full-grown man who tackled a 10-year-old boy during a game of rugby, who got stuck on a zip line during a 2012 Olympics event in London and dangled there for 5 minutes, for him to be the adult in the room speaks volumes about Donald Trump. And yet that's how clear it is that Trump's trade war with China is an unmitigated disaster. The stock market has now plunged twice in only a few days, one of which was the biggest drop of the entire year. It comes after China unveiled a new round of 5 to 10% tariffs on $75 billion worth of US goods, which came, as promised, in retaliation for Trump's 10% tariff on Chinese imports worth $300 billion. The thing is, Trump's solutions for China have never worked. The tariffs have always wreaked havoc upon this country, jacking up prices for everyday items as the costs have been passed along to the US consumer. And despite Trump and his mouthpieces claiming that China's paying the tariffs and not Americans, any freshman business major can debunk that ridiculous claim. Trump even made 2 bailout payments to farmers totaling $28 billion to try and make them square over the trade war. So tell me, if tariffs aren't hurting anyone in this country, then why does $28 billion in US taxpayer dollars have to be redistributed to farmers in the first place? Trump might try to fool you with his rhetoric, but the truth is all out in the open. Now, in fairness, I should note that China has absolutely benefited from unfair practices and a change is necessary, but Trump's strategy isn't working. You don't get credit for rightly identifying a problem and then blowing everything up in a failed effort to fix it. We're in this mess because Trump is too proud to change course, too worried about what the optics of ever admitting fault will do to his tough guy persona. And so instead of swallowing his pride and trying a different strategy, one that might actually, I don't know, work, he's only dug in his heels further while his trade war ratchets up. While US consumers are stuck paying more and more and more for consumer goods, while US farmers have seen as much as 60% of their total sales dry up in an instant, while the yield curve inverts, while the market tanks, while economists have warned that we're inching closer to a recession, all because of one man's delicate ego. And the whole world can see it, including Boris Johnson, who, for maybe the first time, doesn't look like some Looney Tune waving a fish around. The only one who can't, who won't, is Donald Trump.